We'll start this report on Virginia football's 31-24 loss to number 11 Louisville Thursday night with what we have in terms of news on Perris Jones. It is good news. It's now about 10 hours old. We were informed after the game, a little bit after midnight, by folks at Virginia Athletics that Jones had regained movement in all of his extremities when he was taken off the field after the injury in the third quarter, 41 seconds to go, after a helmet-to-helmet hit from actually a former brief teammate, Cameron Kelly, Louisville defensive back, that he had actually lost the movement in his extremities. And of course, we saw, if you were watching the game, you saw that he was on the field for several minutes. I didn't keep a track of how long. It might have been about 20 minutes. It just felt like that long as medical staffs, training staffs from both Louisville and Virginia sidelines worked on him. So the report late last night, after he was taken to the hospital and under treatment, I guess that would have been probably about 2 hours into his treatment, was that he had regained the movement in his extremities. That still leaves a lot out there as to the extent of the injuries. And it's, as I'm recording this, it's about 10:30 Friday morning. So about 12 hours or a little bit more since the injury itself, and 10 hours since that report, and we haven't got any more updates. We will, of course, on Augusta Free Press, whenever we get word, we will update the situation there. So please check us out there. You can check us out on Facebook, and that kind of thing. And so, I guess we should talk through this part of the story. Then we talk more about the game. The hit, again, was by Cameron Kelly. Kelly transferred from North Carolina to Virginia last spring, participated in spring practice with Virginia, and then decided to transfer again. Ended up at Louisville. And he was not flagged on the play, not thrown out of the game on the play. I'm seeing some back and forth between fans who say, Louisville fans who say, well, Perris Jones ducked his head. He was being dragged to the ground. That's, not necessarily ducking your head. And we've certainly seen plays by guys like Kelly who've, tackled with their head being addressed. This is the kind of hit that would have gotten him fined if he was in the NFL. And instead, Kelly was able to still play in the game. We'll talk more about the officiating a little later. I don't like talking about officiating as part of a win and loss situation, but last night was egregious. Jones eventually taken by ambulance to the nearby University of Louisville Medical Center, and we were told last night he was going to remain there overnight. That's probably pretty obvious. We're hopeful, of course, that the sixth-year running back and Jones was a walk-on. This is a guy who's got a remarkable story. He was a walk-on. He was with the program for several years. By the time he gets to be a fourth year, he's actually in the rotation, a starter. Last year was the starting running back. This year started as a starting running back. He's a sixth-year player because with the COVID redshirt year that everybody got who played in 2020. That was a fifth year, and then Virginia players got a sixth year because a potential 6 year, an extra year, we can say, because of the way last season ended, and that's part of the story, unfortunately. As the situation was playing out, and it was so weird last night. Virginia was, they're 2-8 now with the loss, playing against the number 11 team in the country. Down 14-0 at halftime, and it should have been a lot worse. But they're hanging around, and actually on the play where he fumbled, it was one of the odder plays you'll see, and it was a game of odd plays. But he fumbled, and Malik Washington, Virginia wide receiver, trailing the play, the ball just literally he scooped it up and ran in for a touchdown untouched. When you're watching the game and the fans are watching, hey, he scored a touchdown. Virginia's winning the game now at this point. 3 touchdowns in about a 3-minute span of the third quarter. And immediately, though, the attention obviously turned to Jones because he was not moving. And as the treatment went on the field, and you saw the Virginia players gather around, of course, the Louisville players too, respectfully gathering around. The audience was in total stunned silence. The thought came to mind that last night was November 9th, and we're just a few days away from the 1-year anniversary of the worst day that Virginia athletics will ever have. November 13th of last year, 3 UVE football players, Devin Chandler, Lavelle Davis Jr., Deshaun Perry, shot and killed after returning to grounds from a field trip to see a play in Washington, D.C. They were shot by a fellow student. And Mike Collins, who a fourth football player, also shot, had life-threatening injuries, but was able to not only survive, but then actually he's been back. He's he's playing football this fall. He had a stretch a couple weeks ago where he had 5 touchdowns in 2 games, and so you couldn't get that out of your head that these kids who've seen so much already and gone through so much already are now looking at a teammate on the field who's not moving, and and then you got to play the game. You got to go in after they clean him up, pick him up, put him on a cart, drive him out to the hospital. You got to play the game. Coach Tony Elliott was asked to address this. Most of his press conference last night was about this. A couple things about the game, but most of it was about this. And first thing Elliott said, it's quoting, it's a very, very difficult reality of the sport that we play is every play can end that way. And you don't wish that for anybody. But I know one thing, PJ, Perris Jones, is a tough young man, and he lays it on the line every time he goes out there for his football team. And, believing and praying that he's going to have a full recovery and putting that in the Lord's hands. And I'm asking for that in advance and believing that's going to be the case. As Elliott was talking, he was still not aware of the status of Jones. It was probably 45 minutes later that we got the word that that Jones was, at least he had to move in his extremities. The context of what happened earlier this calendar year, last football season, January 2nd on Monday Night Football, NFL, Buffalo Bills defensive back Damar Hamlin suffering a cardiac arrest on the field after making a tackle, T. Higgins from the Cincinnati Bengals, on a routine-looking play. And, of course, that game ended up being stopped. In the context of that, and then not knowing what was going on the field, I do admit when I was watching, I thought maybe the game will be called here because we just didn't know, right? Elliott though said that he's not aware that there was any discussion. He would be aware if there was any discussion of stoppage, and he said it's tough as a football player. I don't think those who haven't played the game, it's kind of hard to understand it, but as a football player, you've weighed that risk, you've weighed that cost before you ever step on the field, and you don't want to see it. You don't want to wish it on anybody. There's a huge risk with this sport, but the only thought for me, just in my experience, has been you go finish and you find a way to try to win it for your teammate to put on the line. There was not any consideration to not play, he said. It's one of those deals that you have to play through that injury. Now, obviously, if it was more severe, I'm sure the officials would have called the game. But for us, we were going to go try and get everything we had to finish for Perris. So obviously there was no discussion, which is a sign that it was not considered life-threatening, because obviously that would have changed the calculus. Now to the game itself. Let's just say it. Virginia got hosed by the ACC. And I can understand. There's no way this wasn't something conscious. It was the officiating was that bad. This group, if the group of officials who worked the game last night is not given a week's vacation or more, then that tells you where the ACC was with this. And Virginia's now 2-8, Louisville's now 9-1, getting ready to with the win last night, clinching a spot in the ACC championship game. The ACC desperately would love that Florida State, which is unbeaten, continues to be unbeaten, goes into that game 12-0 with a shot at the college football playoff. And if Louisville keeps winning, they've got 2 more regular season games, 1 ACC game, and I believe they would have Kentucky in their other game, non-conference rivalry game. If they're 11-1 and on the fringe of the playoff, if they're 7 or 8 in the country, if the ACC can have that game in Charlotte on in prime time on the Saturday of championship games, ACC's happy, very happy. And Virginia coming back and taking that lead and leading in the fourth quarter does not help things in that respect. That takes away some of the luster. If you're the ACC, I mean, Florida State wins that game in Charlotte next month and goes to the playoff. And if you're the ACC, you'd love to have them beat a quality team with an 11-1 record going in, like a Louisville team just on the fringe of the playoff. That would just help enhance the resume, right? So, a Louisville team that would lose to Virginia after having lost to Pitt, that's not quite the same marquee value there. So, Virginia was a 20-point underdog. I think I mentioned that. They were down 14-0 at halftime, a blocked punt for a touchdown. It could have been a lot worse. Louisville missed a short field goal. Had another one where the kicker missed it, but then there was a legal motion penalty that you can't refuse, a false start penalty you can't refuse. It's a stop at your play penalty, and then they bobbled the snap and didn't even get the kickoff. So could have been a lot worse from that standpoint. But then Virginia came alive. 3 touchdowns in a 4-minute span, 2 in a 10-second span to take the lead. And that, the lead came on the play where Jones got hurt and the odd effect of Malik Washington picking up the fumble and running it in for a touchdown. And then things, things were already a little funny. The first play of the game for Virginia on offense, the center Brian Stevens was called for an unsportsmanlike conduct. I believe it was maybe an unnecessary roughness penalty. The Louisville nose tackle grabbed his face mask, and as he was trying to free himself from that, Stevens shoved the guy on a run play that gained 10-12 yards. Virginia not only did not gain the 10-12 yards, they were pushed 15 yards in the other direction. I mean, little things like that, like there were 2 flags that were picked up. This would come at this stage. The 2 defensive holding penalties on running plays. You never see that call, and you saw 2 of them last night. So let's see here. So it's 21-14. Louisville has a 3rd down play. A pass goes up in the air. It's a 50-50 ball. The 2 guys are hand fighting. Virginia's Dre Walker gets the pass interference that extends the drive, leads to a Louisville field goal. They finally kicked one through the uprights, 21-17. And then the refs started picking up the flags. I mentioned there was an unsportsmanlike conduct on Virginia's next possession. Virginia had the ball inside the red zone, a 2nd down run by Kobe Pace to gain just a couple of yards. A Louisville player who assumed he was getting called for unsportsmanlike conduct was protesting to the officials. The officials held a lengthy review, discussion amongst themselves. It seemed like there was an appeals process going on, and decided to pick the flag up. No foul on the play, they said, and then Virginia ended up having to kick a field goal. On the ensuing kickoff, another flag was picked up, a legal block in the back, and then maybe it wasn't a block in the back after another lengthy discussion. Then a flag. So that flag gave the preserved good field position, let's just say, for Louisville, and they ended up scoring a touchdown that tied the game. And then Virginia, as it was able to do most of the night, moved the ball downfield on its next possession, got the ball to midfield on what should have been a 9-yard pass from Anthony Calandria to Malik Washington that would have picked up a 1st down, except that Washington was called for face mask on a stiff arm. Another penalty you just don't see called. And the defender, Storm Duck, was in and around his face mask. That's what everybody thought the foul was going that way. It was going to be 15 yards in the other direction. Virginia be inside the 40-yard line of Louisville. Instead, they're back on their own 30 and 2nd and 16. Ended up having to punt. Louisville scores a touchdown, takes the lead. Virginia comes back one more time. Gets the ball to the Louisville 45, 1:19 to go. Drive stalls there. It's 4th down. Calandria's got one-on-one coverage. Malachi Fields on Storm Duck on the right side. Storm Duck grabs Malachi Fields' face mask, jerks him around, wraps up his waist, wraps up his arms. The throw goes to the ground. There's a face mask there. There's holding there. There's pass interference there. Nothing called. I mean, I understand. We understand that Virginia is now 2-8. Their season's been over for a while. Louisville is on its way to the ACC championship game now. Virginia outgained Louisville 434 to 423. Calandria, the true freshman, who had to start again because Tony Muskett was hurt. Muskett's been hurt. I mean, he got hurt in the opener, hurting his left shoulder, high ankle sprain last week with Georgia Tech. Fortunately for Virginia, Calandria, just a true freshman. he hadn't played like a true freshman. Last night, 20 of 31, 314, gained a net 89 yards on the ground. And when you account for sack yardage, he ran for 109. Hell of a game from Anthony Calandria. Malik Washington, his 8th 100-yard receiving game of the season, 9 catches on 11 targets, 155 yards, and the 42-yard scoop and score that doesn't even count towards the offensive stats. Now our attention turns back to Perris Jones. We'll hope, obviously, and we'll have an update. I mentioned that earlier. We'll have an update whenever we get word. In fact, I'm going to click on my email here one more time just in case. No update from UVA as we're finishing this recording at 10:41 or so a.m. Friday Eastern time. So we will have whatever we can get when we get it from UVA Athletics. We will put that on Augusta Free Press and an update there. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, items for the mailbag, please get in touch with me at chris@augustafreepress.com.